Share my, and then we will get started. Whoa, what's happening here? There we go. And one more thing. Okay, so there we go. Hi everyone, my name is Rishma. I've been an occupational therapist for over 25 years. I've spent 6 years teaching stress management at Richmond Hospital because I live in Richmond here. And I've done the research on which today's presentation is based. I'm so honored and thrilled to be here speaking with all of you today. And I'd really like to sincerely thank Nicole in Kelowna and Colleen in Cranbrook for inviting me to speak this evening. And thank you all for taking time out of your busy evening to spend with me. I hope that the next hour and a half will be beneficial for you, not just in the very valuable work you provide for the care and education of our children, but also in your personal lives. And I have to say, as a mother of two who used daycare services and preschool services when my boys were young, I just have to say thank you so much respect and gratitude for the work that you do. So these are the objectives for today's workshop. Today's session is an overview, covers stress management from a broad perspective. The first two objectives are a review of very important information about stress, which applies to everyone. And the third and fourth objectives will provide a bit more context as to how stress presents itself in children, including understanding some things that may exacerbate stress or make stress worse in children, as well as some things that hopefully can alleviate stress in children. And the last objective is hopefully some valuable strategies you can walk away with tonight that might make your work a little bit more easier and joyful. I'll also have some poll questions to make things interactive and for me to learn a little bit more about all of you. So we're actually going to start with our first two back-to-back poll questions. So let's have Nicole bring out poll question number 1. Okay. So poll question number 1 is, what are the age categories of the children you serve? Oh, this is great. So the majority is preschool and then a mixture, which is great. And this will actually make sense as I'm giving the session, because there's actually really good information in the studies about having a mixture or having just preschool. So that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. And now we're actually going to jump right into poll question number 2. So poll question number 2. What word comes to mind when you think of the word stress? So 82% of you have identified worry or anxiety as what comes to your mind when you think of the word stress. And that's really important to know, because the first takeaway from tonight's workshop is to understand the difference between a stressor and the stress response. So for those of you who identified work, family, or traffic as what comes to mind when you hear the word stress, these are stressors. They are the things or the people that cause us stress. For children, this may be their parents, or hunger, or lack of sleep. For those of you who responded with headache or worry, anxiety, these are our stress responses. So for children, this might be something like a tummy ache, or a headache, or crying, or being scared. Many of us interchange what we mean when we talk about stress, but it's very important to differentiate between what causes us stress and how we respond to what causes us stress. So now that we understand a bit better the difference between a stressor and a stress response, let's understand better the way the stress response is activated and the hardwired aspect of it. Essentially, when the brain detects or perceives a threat, the stress response is activated, and this releases the hormone called cortisol, which then releases adrenaline, steals glucose from everywhere in the body to send it to the arms and legs, reduces digestion, and reduces melatonin. This is a process that's hardwired from the time of the cave people. So think back to the time of the cave people, where the biggest threats really for a cave person was a large animal that might show up at your cave door and eat you and your family, or steal what you've just hunted for yourselves for food, right? And so when your brain detects that threat, then obviously in order to be able to fight this large animal, you would need to have all the energy possible in your arms and your legs. And so that's this hardwired stress response. That's how it actually came about. And this hardwired stress response hasn't changed, but what has changed is what we perceive now to be threats. So back in the time of the cave people, there were a few threats perhaps, right? A large animal, or maybe some other cave people that you didn't know, or maybe Mother Nature or something like that, right? Whereas today, whether you're a child or whether you're an adult, we perceive many more things as being threats. And so in today's world, that hardwired stress response is activated multiple times in a day. And there's many, many people walking around sort of chronically with that stress response always on, always on, always on, and having very, very little time for the downtime, very little time to allow that to come back to normal and the hormone levels go back to normal. So stress is a very insidious part of the lives that we all lead right now, unfortunately. So I'm going to actually put on a video, which is a really fun video that kind of explains a little bit about what I've said and puts it in a really fun way.
Watch this. One little piece of paper can have a remarkable effect. Stress is stressful. But if you understand a bit about what it is, you'll be better able to deal with it. First, though, take a few deep breaths. In fact, do that anytime you feel stressed. It helps. Stress is a survival mechanism. When danger appears, it can get you out of trouble quickly. Your body crashes up the gears and throws all its resources into getting you moving. Your heart pumps furiously to increase blood pressure. Glucose is sent to the muscles as a fuel injection, and you become totally focused on what psychologists call fight or flight. Thing is, this emergency state is only meant to last just long enough to get you out of danger. But here in the 21st century, we stress about different things, and for much, much longer. Your brain and body stay on red alert, and you'll be less able to think clearly, learn, or remember things. Take a few more deep breaths, because as you now know, stress is a physical reaction, and deep breathing helps to counteract its effects. So, what else can you do? Okay, top tips to reduce stress. First, get plenty of exercise. Let out all that locked up energy. Now, back to the problem. Get in control. Scope out the situation and how you're going to tackle it. Don't stress alone. Talk to someone. Socialize. and have a laugh. You can't laugh and quake with fear at the same time. Get down with nature on a big or small scale. And if your mind won't stop worrying, give it something else to do instead.
All right. Just a fun little video that I like to show. This is also an illustration of the impact that stress has in the body. So in terms of the brain, it really affects mood. It increases anxiety and irritability. It increases your heart rate and your blood pressure. Your diaphragm pushes upward and it really causes very shallow and quick breathing. And we'll talk about diaphragmatic breathing later on in the session today. It also causes inflammation levels to rise throughout the body, causes muscles to tense and tighten, right, in order to be able to respond to whatever it is that's you're perceiving as a threat. And then it actually shuts down digestion because it wants all your focus to be on the threat. So cramps might happen, poor nutrient absorption might happen, abnormal bowel movements for sure, because the digestive system just gets shut down. And the one thing that's not on this slide is that actually it affects sleep as well, because the hormone melatonin is actually stopped or slowed down in its release. And so when we're under stress, it really affects our ability to sleep. And we know that, right? Because that's just what happens when we're stressed out. Okay, poll question number 3. All right. How would you respond if I told you that in the next 5 minutes, we'll be asking each of you to turn your cameras on and to say a few words about the things you find most stressful about the work you do? All right. So the majority of you are not really sure because you weren't expecting this, and so you might need some time to prepare. So not to worry, I won't be asking anyone to turn your cameras on or speaking, but the point of this activity was really to illustrate that the exact same scenario can be presented to us, but there can be a variety of responses depending on your thoughts or perceptions about that scenario. So for example, those of you who were like, sure, I don't have a problem with that. Well, maybe because, I don't know, your house is really tidy and your hair is done and, and then for those of you who are like, yeah, no, I'm not really sure. Maybe it's because we asked you to turn your cameras off. And so now you're relaxing or you're, whatever. And so you might need some time to just sort of tidy things up or think about what you might want to say. And then for those of you who said, no way, well, I mean, maybe you're already in your pajamas and you're already cuddling with, your child or a pet or something. And so even the thought to those people, even the thought of sort of turning on your camera and having to say something probably caused a little bit of an increased heart rate for you, right? And so that's important, and that point will come up later as well. So notice how the majority of the time all the children that you look after are expected to do similar tasks, but only some children respond in a stressful way. Why is that? It's because of their perceptions about the situation. And that was the point of this activity for all of you, is to understand that, whatever we perceive for whatever situation that we're in is going to determine how we're going to respond to that particular situation. So for example, say it's time for circle time and you have a child that's just had a meltdown. What could possibly be causing this meltdown? It could be so many different factors. Maybe they didn't have a good sleep the night before and they're enjoying the task that they were doing. They don't want to transition to another activity just yet. Maybe the last time they were in circle time, they had a negative experience. Maybe they just need to use the washroom and now they're scared that they might get in trouble if they don't get into circle time right away. Maybe they're hungry and disappointed because they were hoping it was lunchtime already. So this puts caregivers like yourselves in very difficult positions, because how in the world could you possibly know what might be going on with each child in any given moment? So let's go back to the word perception. And perception is linked to another word, threat. The stress response is activated when our brains perceive a threat. So what might be a threat to children? Well, it could be tension with peers, for example, fighting over a toy. It could be COVID and this new reality where you have to wear masks, you have to hand sanitize, you have to do things differently. But for children, this may be even more confusing because there are certain situations that require masks and others that don't. And so this can be very threatening to a child. Not to mention that everyone looks different when they're wearing masks. So they may not be able to readily pick out their friends or their childcare provider. And this delay may lead to a stress response. Another perception of threat may be that a child may feel excluded from a group, perhaps by their own lack of interest in the subject matter, but nonetheless, they're not able to understand that. All they know is that they're not part of whatever is going on in that moment. And then there's this child who is the picture of what so many of us feel from time to time, just utter exhaustion and frustration. Now, it's also important to note that our brain cannot tell the difference between something that's happening in real time or something that's being recalled from the past or imagined in the future, which explains how in the previous poll question, if you were one of the ones who responded with no way, your heart probably already started fluttering just at the thought of having to turn the camera on and speak. That's why, because our brain doesn't know the difference between something that is actually happening right now or something that could happen in the future or has happened in the past. So every time your mind goes there, your body will react in that same way. And the same thing happens with children. The stress response works the same way in children. They could be imagining something completely unrelated to what might be going on for them in that moment. And this can also activate their stress response. So, time for poll question number 4. Okay, which behavior would you say is the most challenging for you to manage? And Nicole, I have to say, I'm not at all monitoring the chat box, so I hope that you're doing that. And just let me know if there's something in there that I need to address. Okay, so looks like the majority, or 50%, it's physical aggression, and then the remainder is emotional outbursts. So that's important to know. And what we need to do now is actually understand what is it that causes stress to children, because this may explain some of what it is that we might be experiencing with the kids that we look after. So first of all, their own bodies could actually be a source of stress for children, especially if they haven't slept well or they're hungry, or maybe they've waited too long to pee or poo and they're in physical discomfort. This is something that you could try and enlist the help of the parents with. So if there's a way for them to let you know when they drop them off, if Johnny didn't sleep well last night, or if Alicia hasn't had her morning bowel movement yet. For children, a lot of their responses stem from the people around them. So as we discussed in the previous slide, perhaps their peers are a source of stress for them. And there's actually studies that show that preschoolers do experience stress from their peers because they're all still developing their social skills and their emotional regulation and sense of right and wrong. So actually, those preschools that have sort of the same age children, the studies have shown that the children in those situations do experience a little bit of a higher level of stress because of the fact that they're around the same age as everybody else. And so they're all at the same developmental level as each other. Whereas those kids who are in a mixed setting where there's older kids, younger kids, that kind of thing, the stress levels are actually less because the older kids can then role model problem solving or social etiquette or those kinds of things, or sharing, can role model those things for the younger kids. And so then the stress levels are a little bit less. We all know also that children are very impacted by their family situation. So you may have a child who's very well nourished, sleeps really well, appears to have all the material things they need, but if there's tension within their family dynamics, then this will also affect their sense of security and may make them feel a little bit more anxious. And then there are the people who provide care for the children, and that would be all of you. And so your energy, your vibe, that rubs off on the children you care for. So notice your own energy. And if you're having a bad morning, maybe take some time before starting work to sort of reset yourself so that you're giving off positive, nurturing, and supportive vibes to the children that you serve. There's likely nothing worse than starting off your day on the wrong foot and then half your kiddos are also having meltdowns. And finally, fear of the unknown. And this affects adults too, of course, but has a greater impact on children because of their lack of development with respect to understanding time, understanding that the task they're working on will come to an end, but not knowing when. Transitions play a large part in what causes stress to children. So we're going to watch a video to understand this a little bit more. Great. So, of course, in preparing this talk, I did do research. And so I wanted to sort of share a little bit of that research with you. And some of it I already have mentioned. But one of the things was that a lack of secondary attachment can increase a child's stress levels. So what they did in this particular research study is that they actually measured the levels of cortisol in children. This is the hormone that's released when the stress response is activated. And they found that those kids who were cared for at home produced very low levels of cortisol, whereas those kids who were in a child care center produced higher levels of cortisol, which is probably not at all a surprise because most people would conclude that it must be separation anxiety that's responsible for increasing the child's stress. Well, they thought that too, so they studied this even further and discovered that it's in fact not separation anxiety that increases cortisol in children at childcare centers. It's actually a lack of a secondary attachment to the providers that they're spending their days with. And as I mentioned briefly previously, social interaction among preschoolers can increase a child's stress levels because they've not yet developed their social skills and are still learning about what's right and wrong and learning about empathy and kindness, but also experiencing, perhaps without understanding, emotions like jealousy or envy or anger. So at this point, you might be thinking, wow, how in the world can I overcome these barriers and help the kids I care for feel less stressed? What can we do to help? And I've tried to simplify it, and nothing about what you do is simple, and I completely understand and appreciate that. But just for the purposes of this workshop, I've tried to simplify. So there are three main things that can be done to sort of alleviate some of the stress that children might be feeling. Consistency, routine, and structure. And what we're going to do is we're going to explore each one individually so that we can actually get a really good understanding of each one. So I think it might be time for poll question number 5. Okay, so what's the definition of consistency? Go. Okay, so 60% of you feel that consistency is commonplace tasks, chores, or duties as must be done regularly or at specified intervals. So let's have a look at the definition of consistency. Consistency is steadfast adherence to the same principles, course, form, etc. So what that means is, like, what might consistency look like in a childcare center? It would mean that there would be consistent rules for everyone, right? So not one set of rules for a particular gender and a different one for other genders, or one set of rules for different ages and not others, unless it has to do, of course, with safety, right? That's different. But there should be consistent rules for everyone. And then consistent, I guess, consequences too, right? There should also be consistency in the vibe or energy from the caregivers, right? And again, I did talk about that before, I mentioned it before, but you know, children feed off the energy that they feel of the people around them. And so when there's consistency from the childcare providers, then that actually helps the children to feel secure and stable and have that, they're able to actually develop that secondary attachment to their childcare providers. And then when that secondary attachment is made, their levels of cortisol decrease, right? And that's what we want. We want their levels of cortisol to decrease. We want them to experience less stress. And then finally, consistency in the support and nurture. And so it might look like it's a repetition, a repetition of the second point, which is consistency in vibe or energy, but it is different in the sense that there should be consistency in the level of support and nurturing that's given, sort of regardless of that child's behavior, because I think that children are so perceptive and quite sensitive that, you know, if they feel that if they misbehaved and then the behavior changes towards them because of their misbehavior, then that also increases their stress, right? And makes it difficult for them then to feel that attachment as readily as if Okay, there was a misbehavior, there's a consequence because of the misbehavior, because that's what happens with everybody, but it doesn't change the way that the child care provider is providing support or nurture for that child. So I hope that makes sense. But that's what consistency would look like in a child care facility. So really consistent rules for everyone, kind of everyone is treated the same, they're treated equally, and the vibe is consistent, the support and nurture is consistent. Okay, time now for poll question number 6. What's the definition of routine? Yeah, you guys got it. Excellent. So, routine are the commonplace tasks, chores, or duties as must be done regularly or at specified intervals, typical or everyday activity. So, routine, when we talk about routine, we're talking about the way that things are done, the step by step process of certain tasks, like putting things away in their respective places and maybe playing the same song while cleaning up. So, or a routine way to greet each other, hello and goodbye, whether that means lining up in a certain way or saying certain words or having a routine of going to the cubby. When there's a routine, it fosters comfort because the child knows exactly what's expected of them depending on the task at hand. And a routine will also orient children to the day of the week. For example, especially if there are specific treats or fun activities reserved for special days of the week. Routines also have indirect benefits, as older or more experienced children can teach routines to new children. Transitions can also be made routine as well, and this can result in less stress and more ease. So routines are very, very important. Poll question number 7, and I'm sure that you can guess what this question will be. What is the definition of structure? Yeah, you guys know exactly what you're doing. This is great. All right, so yes, structure is the mode of building, construction, or organization. It's an arrangement of parts, elements, or constituents. So when we talk about structure, we're really talking broadly about how every day is structured, as well as weekly structure, monthly structure. So this is about really bringing routine and consistency to life. Structure is about the child knowing what to expect because there is consistent structure to their day and a routine as to how the tasks are performed or carried out. So just like I had said before, maybe there could be a special day. So for one example of structure might be that, maybe every Monday the kids get free time to do whatever they'd like within certain parameters, obviously. And then that way, Mondays don't have to be so hard to say goodbye to parents as they know that they'll have free time that day or whatever it is that the kids really, really, really like to do. Maybe that could be on a Monday. And then what structure also allows is that parents can cue the children. If they know about Mondays being special, then in this way, the parents can be supporting your efforts to alleviate their child's stress levels at the beginning of the week. Because I definitely know with my older son, just the weekend was hard enough for him because change was so hard. And so he would love the weekends. And then when Monday came, it would be so hard to drop him back off again in preschool, right? So in the same way, if there is structure and if it is made sort of fun and inviting, then you can actually get the parents to help you out that way as well. So things like having a monthly calendar located somewhere, a weekly calendar located somewhere, and then a daily calendar. All of these things can help to orient the children as to what to expect or what will be next, and will make transitions much smoother. Now, of course, depending on the age of the children and their level of pedagogy, then you might want to either use pictures to show a clock, right? Like we saw in that video that we saw. So rather than having the actual time, the clock face actually had pictures of activities that were located where the numbers would be, so that way it can help orient younger children as to what is the next activity that's going to be coming up and those kinds of things. So I have another video to show you, and this will be about, so there's two videos. The first video is about children with autism spectrum disorder, but the reason why I'm showing you this video is because the things that they talk about, the content of the video is actually very applicable to all children, to typical children as well. So keep that in mind. And then the second video, I'm actually going to end up just not showing you the entire thing. I'll just show you a little bit of it, okay?
You can help your company succeed with the right business name. Follow these steps to hammer out a name that will support all your company's needs.
Sorry. Oh no. I don't know what you guys are seeing right now. Nicole, are you seeing the entire thing?
Hi, Rishma. I'm seeing like a paused video right now.
Are you seeing the entire video? Can you see the whole screen?
No, it just says, no, it says the environment, like environment is cut off.
Yeah, sorry. Let me just.
Nope, that's okay.
I knew I should have left it alone. So let me just, there we go. So it's
Yeah, now I can see the full screen.
Perfect. And I'm gonna just not.
Welcome to the How-To series. The topic for this how-to is routines. You will see examples of routines being used in the preschool classroom. Some of the children you will see may not have a diagnosis of ASD. However, the examples all depict strategies and teaching practices that can be beneficial for all students. As we talk about environmental considerations, such as visual supports and schedules, it's also important for us to include the use of routines. While routines and schedules might sound the same, these are actually two different considerations. Schedules assist students in understanding what the expectations are and help students transition from activity to activity. Routines, on the other hand, are the tasks we complete throughout our day. Most of us have a variety of routines, for morning, for work, and even for bedtime. Routines include tasks like getting dressed, brushing our teeth, and even making a cup of coffee in the morning. But routines can also include tasks like unpacking a book bag, hanging a coat up in a cubby, getting our materials out independently, or even learning to use the bathroom independently. Developing and maintaining routines is important because first and foremost, they utilize the strengths of students with ASD. Remember, those with ASD thrive in a routine environment, and with the right support, quickly learn the steps of a routine. Once a routine has been learned, the student with ASD is able to focus on the content of a task rather than the steps. Further, it's important to understand that teaching routines helps reduce anxiety and helps the student understand what to do and ultimately increases independence. In these next photos, you will notice visual supports designed to help a student learn a new routine. In this photograph, you will notice a visual support designed to assist a student with the routine of going home. In this next photograph, you will see a visual support designed to help a student independently learn how to wash their hands. As you can see, there are many steps to this routine. Let's look at some examples of routines. In these videos, you will see students using several different kinds of routines. Look for the type of routine being used with the student. Also, watch for the student's response to the routine.
said these crazy shoes. They're here. Then you get your tie. Here, why don't you get your lunch out first? Yes, very pretty. You can put it on the sandbox and then. And I got a pizza sandwich. And I got eat your sandwich. I mean my drink. And I eat it watery food. And I ate questions out. Because there's water. Funny though. Why don't you open your orange while you're waiting for Miss Lauren? Each other. Goodbye, friends. Goodbye, friends. I got that. Thank you. You all right? Yeah. Right. Okay, look, you're finished. Take it off. Look it on top. Can you put it there? Where's he go? And Junior, good job. I get on the step sign. Be a line leader. Let's go all be line leaders. Sure. We can all be line leaders. My boss. You can say. You ready? You can say.
As you can see, the teachers supported routines in the classroom by making different routines a consistent part of the day, by providing structure, by giving students an opportunity to practice, by using visuals to support routines, and by prompting and using reinforcement. These routines help the students be successful. Now that you've seen some more examples of routines, you are more aware of how routines can be used in the classroom. Remember, developing and maintaining routines is important because they utilize the strengths of students with ASD, and they help a student focus on the content of a task rather than the steps. Routines also help reduce anxiety, teach expectations, and increase independence.
All right, let me bring the other video up.
Good morning. My line looks so perfect already. Face forward for me, hands to your side. Face forward for me, hands to your side, zero voice. Face forward for me, hands to your side, zero voice. Thank you. Grab the line. Awesome. Wow, look at this. Hands to your side, facing forward. Good morning, Kiana. Welcome. All right, my friends. Are we ready to go? Yes. All right, we're gonna walk to the end of the ramp, my friends. If you left your backpack on the side of the So as opposed to getting started right away with standards, establish the culture that's going to happen in your classroom throughout the year. It allows students to feel comfortable and also get them to understand what you expect of them and then get to know how the classroom works. Welcome. Look at that smile. At the beginning of the day, I always stand at the door and I greet students with either a high five, a fist bump, a handshake, or a hug towards the end of the school year. I just like to set my day off right with a positive tone. Who doesn't want to have a nice smiling face when they come in for work, basically? This is their job, you can consider. So when they come in, I like them to feel like I want them here, that I've been waiting for them to get here. And I believe that when you start your day off like that, you're setting them up for a positive day. Right now, we're going to get your desk organized first, okay? So go ahead and take your binder off and you can put it down next to your table, next to your seat. Just quickly on the floor is fine. You can check it out while you do so. In your desk, you're going to have two sides, a right side and a left side. And one side is going to be for your soft books, and the other side will be for your hard books. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to find your left hand. It's important to invest a lot of time in your routines at the beginning of the year, because that's when you have the most time to establish them. So I start at the beginning and I spend a lot of time on my routines, my expectations, doing things again, and even doing things again. And as the time goes throughout the school year, I have to spend less and less time, and those things become second nature to the students. And you're going to.
So the reason why I showed that second video is really to show how things like your vibe, your energy as the childcare providers are so important, right, to the children that you serve, but also that whole messaging around doing things in a certain way, setting expectations, and sort of the fact that, yes, you have to repeat and repeat and repeat. And also I understand that all these videos I'm showing you, that was pre-COVID, right? So we know that things have changed because of COVID. You are not able to be as physically affectionate with the kids right now because of COVID. So I do understand that, but I just thought that second video was quite helpful, and I really found it beneficial. I took away a few things from it as well, so I hope that you did too. So what I want to do now is just recap some of the practical, we're not done, but just recapping some of the practical takeaways from the workshop, those things that we've sort of talked about that hopefully are already being done, or if not, they can be brought in and start to be done, or they can even be modified to help them serve the children that you serve, and kind of bring an environment that is consistent, that has routine, that has structure, so that the children feel that level of stability and support and confidence and comfort. So developing daily and weekly schedules, building routines for daily and repetitive tasks, and then building in transition times and activities. So the transition piece, I think, is a really big piece, and some of the research that I've done really gets into talking about transition times. Because we're often asking a large group of children to do the same thing at the same time, transition times can often be the most chaotic. There's also a higher risk for children to be injured, I suppose, if things are really chaotic during transition times. But fortunately, there are some effective strategies for keeping control of the group and making this time a learning time as well. The main goals for terrific transition times would be to capture and hold the children's attention, maintain a secure and predictable routine, move children from one activity to another in a safe and organized manner, and to have fun. And so there are some strategies that can meet those goals during major transition times. So for example, during free play, children will often be very engaged in their chosen activity, and they'll find it difficult to abruptly stop what they're doing. You may find it helpful to give them a warning that playtime will soon be over. It's best to simply avoid calling out 5 more minutes because, of course, if they're the younger children, they really don't have a concept of what 5 minutes is and what it feels like. Rather, if it's possible, to go directly to each child and tell them, you have time for just one more turn at the art easel, or You know, you may not want to start on that puzzle. Cleanup's going to be coming before you have time to finish it. Even with fair warning, many children will be reluctant to stop playing to clean up. It is helpful to make cleanup a fun time as well. You can select a special signal to alert the children that playtime is over, maybe a song or a flicking of the lights or a ringing of the bell. You may wish to allow a child to do this fun task. They can take turns or rotate doing that fun task of flicking the lights. Many programs have a special cleanup song that the children enjoy singing while they clean up. And then this way it makes the transition more fun and less stressful for the kids. The direct supervision that you provide will also ensure compliance in the children. So, you know, directing the children individually rather than trying to direct them, you know, as a whole group. So Susie, I need you to put that puzzle back on the shelf. It's cleanup time. Or Anson, would you help me get these green blocks off the floor? You can also make cleanup time fun by engaging the children's imagination. Let's pretend we're squirrels gathering up our nuts, which could be Legos on the floor for winter, that kind of thing. So lots of different examples of how to get the kids engaged during transition, right? So even when it's time for lineup, there could be activities around the lineup, like what you saw in some of the videos. They were singing a song, a goodbye song, and then they had frogs on the ground for, you know, the lineup things. So all the different transitions that happen can be made a little bit easier with just some fun and, you know, different thought to it, and also to make the transition itself a routine, so that, you know, whenever we do cleanup, we do this, or we play this song, or we do it this way, or whenever we say goodbye, we do it this way. So lots of different examples in terms of things that can be done to help make transitions easier, because the research shows that it's the transitions where the kids have the most difficulty, because they're not able to comprehend that, you know, the task is going to come to an end. They're going to have to start something else soon, that they will have another opportunity to do the same task, but it won't be for, you know, maybe the next day or a few days later, that kind of thing. So transitions are tricky for all the kids. Now, this is really where I want to spend a little bit more time and talk about actually because we've talked now about the stress response, the impact that it has on the body. We've talked about sort of very practical ways that a childcare environment can be set up to alleviate some of the stress that children feel when they feel like they don't know what's coming up next, or those kinds of things. But now I really want to talk about the strategies that can actually help sort of physiologically and emotionally to reduce stress response, because we may not always be able to understand or know what might be causing stress in the children that we're taking care of. But it's important to have tools in order to be able to just help them at least alleviate their stress enough that, you know, they can then calm themselves down and then maybe participate in the next activity or those kinds of things. So we have, all of us human beings have a sympathetic nervous system and then a parasympathetic nervous system. So the video that you watched sort of towards the beginning, I think it was the first video where it talked about fight or flight, right? That is the sympathetic nervous system. That's the stress response. So when we're responding to stress and we're in that fight or flight mode, it's our sympathetic nervous system that actually gets turned on. And this is what causes all of those things that, you know, we talked about, the heartbeat faster, your palms start to sweat. Some people get an instant headache, you get tummy aches, you get cramps, you might get shaky, you know, those kinds of things. That's the stress response. So that's the sympathetic nervous system that's being activated. The parasympathetic nervous system is the total opposite. So that's what we call the rest and digest system. That's the system that is in use when we have been able to calm ourselves down, that's the system that we should all be trying to spend the majority of our time in, the parasympathetic nervous system. Because the parasympathetic nervous system keeps our physiology in a healthy state, because it doesn't cause our heart to beat faster. It doesn't cause our blood pressure to rise. It doesn't cause us to feel fear or anxiety or worry or anger. It actually allows us to relax, to feel calm, and it also helps us to conserve our energy, right? Because when we're angry or worried, or that takes a lot of energy, right? And when we come out of that state, we're drained, we're exhausted, we're wiped, both physically, emotionally, and mentally, because it just takes everything out of us. And the same thing happens with children, right? But if we can, as care providers, actually educate our children and guide our children and teach our children how to use strategies that will actually increase the amount of time that they spend in the parasympathetic nervous system, then I think that we would be doing them a really, really big service. Because at their age, they don't understand why they feel the way they feel. They just know that they don't feel good. They feel yucky or sad or scared. But if we can offer them tools of how to actually help themselves feel better, then we're actually helping them and educating them and setting them up for success. So one of the first things is diaphragmatic breathing. And so we mentioned it at the beginning, where one of the effects of responding to stress is that our diaphragm actually pushes up and our breathing becomes very shallow and very quick. Diaphragmatic breathing is where you take a very, very slow and deep breaths. And with the children, you can even call it belly breathing, right? Because literally, if you have them, lie down, and then you have them put one hand on their belly and the other hand on their chest, you can teach them how to take a deep breath, which will cause their belly to rise, right? And then to let their breath out, which will do the opposite, right? And if the chest is moving, then we don't want that. That means they're not breathing from their belly. They're not actually using their diaphragm, right? So teaching them diaphragmatic breathing, what the studies have shown is that diaphragmatic breathing actually reverses the effects of the stress response. So whether you want it to or not, basically, right? And so if any of you have ever taken like public speaking courses or anything like that, they'll say that if you feel really nervous before speaking, you want to do your deep breathing. Or if you've ever taken anger management classes, they tell you the same thing. If you feel your anger rising, you need to take slow, deep breaths, because that actually physiologically reverses that stress response, and it reduces the heart rate, it reduces the blood pressure, and it actually causes the muscles to relax and doesn't allow them to tense up. So this could be an activity that you might want to, if you're not already, introduce to some of the children that you serve, and make it an activity to teach them how to do this kind of breathing. And the studies have shown, and this is hard to do, I mean, for kids, I don't think that they would get here, but just for your information for adults, the studies have shown that if you're able to take 6 breaths in a minute, that seems to be the magic number for the most benefits through diaphragmatic breathing. So there are apps. I have an app on my Apple Watch, actually. It's a Breathe app, but there's lots of apps. There's an app called iBreathe. You can actually set it to 6 breaths a minute, and then you can go ahead. If you can do that several times a day, you will also see that it is actually very, very helpful to lower your heart rate and to just get you in a state of feeling more relaxed and calm, right? So that's an example of something that you could do with the kids. Another example in strategies that really help to reduce stress or at least alleviate stress a little bit are mindful activities or grounding activities, because what we find is that when someone is sort of highly anxious, or if they're really, really scared of something, but it's hard to figure out what it is that they might be scared of. And again, when we talked about before, you know, your brain doesn't know the difference between something you're just imagining, right? Or something that's happening right now. So when there's a lot of anxiety, and this is with children and with adults, I actually teach this technique to adults with anxiety. You can use what's called grounding and using the 5 senses, right? And so, and I'm sure some of you already do this, or you've heard about it, or you know about it, and you're probably using it in bits and pieces. But the 5 senses, so what you do is basically, you know, identify 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can hear, 3 things that you can touch, 2 things that you can smell, and then 1 thing that you can taste. You can kind of maybe do it around snack time or lunchtime or something like that. So you can do this just with one child on their own if they're really having a meltdown and you're trying to sort of calm them down. You could start off with doing the deep breathing. And if that doesn't seem to be helping them as much and they might need a little bit more, you can do this grounding activity with them. Because what it does is it actually brings them back to this present moment. That's why it's called a grounding activity. It grounds them. So they're out there in their mind, they're somewhere, and it's causing them stress. So whether it's their imagination, whether it's something that they're remembering that's making them upset. So what we need to do is help them to come back to this present moment and help to ground them, right? One of the other things that's a really effective strategy for stress management is spending time out in nature. And I know that every single childcare provider does spend time outside, right? So knowing that spending time out in nature is really important, that's great. But what you could do is you could combine spending time in nature with a mindful or grounding activity. So for example, when it's fall, right, and the leaves turn color and they feel different and they look different, you know, you could actually collect some leaves, right, and have each child, you know, have the leaf and then really focus all the energy on looking at the leaf and understanding the leaf in terms of what does it look like? You know, what color is it? What does it feel like in your hands? Does it have a smell to it? Right? Those kinds of things. Because then again, what you're doing is you are helping the children to be able to be just in this present moment. I think that, you know, in today's society with social media and just, you know, instant everything with technology, it's so difficult for children to not get distracted, right? It's not really their fault, it's just the environment that they're living in. But this is a skill that we could really, really help teach them that will be so good for them for their entire life, is just the ability to kind of block out all other distractions and just focus on something, right? So mindful or grounding activities are
Rishma?
really,
Oh,
yes.
sorry, I'm being your timekeeper right now. So
Thank
it's 7:05. Yeah. And there was some great stuff in the chat too. Someone had said one thing they do is they smell the flowers and then blow out the candles in the class.
Yes.
And then someone else said, where I work, we use cultural music, like in the background.
Yes.
And then about the cleanup, someone said that they have one child during cleanup to go around and tell the other children to start cleaning. And they love being part of that as well.
Perfect. And that's excellent, right? Because that way you're fostering leadership, right? And you're also kind of, that pressure is off of you, right? You're allowing the children to learn that for themselves, and it takes the pressure off of you, which is perfect. Oh, I love all these examples. That's great. Thank you. And so that leaves me about 10 minutes before we sort of open it up for questions. So, which is good. It's perfect timing. The next one is guided meditations. Now, obviously with children that are young, you know, you wouldn't call it meditation, but if you check, there are apps, the Insight Timer app, which actually has timed meditations, but also meditations that are themed, right? So they have guided imagery, they have progressive muscle relaxation, they have body scans, all that kind of stuff. And so what I would suggest is try some of those yourself. And if you feel that it might be beneficial and appropriate for the children that you look after, that could be one of the activities that you might do, is just put on a guided meditation. So there's so much research out there in terms of the benefits of meditation with reducing stress. So again, meditation hits all of those main points where it reduces heart rate, reduces blood pressure, relaxes the muscles, helps us feel calm, and actually helps us to be more focused, and increases those parts of our brain that have to do with compassion and empathy. And so really that's what we want to foster in the children that are growing up, right? We want to be able to give them these tools so that they're going to be our leaders, right? They're going to be leading this country. So we want to be able to give them all these tools so they can be successful. So guided meditations is something that, you know, if you feel comfortable as a child care provider to do that with your kids, then definitely I think that would be wonderful. Because there have been studies with children and meditation. In fact, there have been studies in schools who have experimented with meditation. So rather than having detention, they actually go for meditation, and they have found that that works so much better, and that behavior problems and, you know, emotional outbursts and those kinds of things, physical aggression, all of that reduced through meditation. So meditation is something, I don't think that you're ever too young or too old to start learning how to meditate. So that's something. Music in the background, and I'm so glad, Nicole, that you mentioned that somebody did say that they do that, and I think that's wonderful. And music can be like a spa-like kind of music, but music can also be, you know, like cultural music, or you can have themes, you know, and you can then play music that's appropriate to the themes that you might have. And again, this makes it more fun and engaging for the children. And if, you know, music is so, I don't know about you, but for me, music is so amazing because it can actually change my mood, right? So, you know how if you're having a bad day or you've got the blues or whatever, and your favorite song comes on the radio, for example, and all of a sudden it just snaps you out of this mood that you're in, and you get really hyped. And so, you know, there's music that helps put me in a relaxed mood and a calm mood. There's music that puts me in a melancholy mood. There's music that puts me in a really energized and refreshed mood. So there's music that puts me in an angry mood, actually, right? So, you know, use music to sort of set the mood and set the tone. And if you use relaxing music, then you can actually set that relaxing tone. And also, some childcare facilities also actually use a very low voice so that they're almost whispering, right? And so that in itself helps to set the tone of just slow and relaxed and calm, right? So you can definitely use the environment to help you set the type of tone that you're wanting to set in the classroom. And then the last one is practicing gratitude. And again, the studies are all out there that show that people who practice gratitude on a daily basis are much better able to manage their stress, experience less stress, and are typically those people that are considered sort of optimists. They have positive outlooks, those kinds of things. So again, you're not going to call it gratitude with the young kids. You might call it time for thanks or something like that. And you might start small with them, but it is really important for them to get into the habit of being thankful and of having that perspective of being grateful for what they have, right? And then because the hope is that as they get older, so gratitude actually shifts the brain and rewires the brain and shifts it to a more positive perspective. So if there's any tendency for the person to be kind of more on the negative or pessimistic side of things for whatever, for their genetics or their environment or whatever it is, if they're able to practice gratitude every single day, they're able to actually shift and rewire their brain so that they can be more optimistic, more hopeful, more positive. So gratitude is something that if you can bring it into your childcare centers in very small little ways and ways that the kids can understand with whatever developmental age that they're at, I think that would be really, really helpful. So, you know, from an occupational therapist who has experienced stress in my own life, but also has researched stress, has taught about stress, and is continuing to try to spread the word about stress management. These tools are actually really, really important strategies, not just for the children that you serve, but for yourself, right? And so, you know, if there's anything here, hopefully that you didn't know before, hopefully you can take that away and that will help you as well in your own life. So I'm hoping that maybe we are making good time for questions. Let me just make sure that I don't have, I did want to go through the objectives again to make sure. So the first objective was to understand the difference between a stressor and the stress response. And we did go through that. We watched a video about that. Understand the hardwired process of the stress response. So again, that's the flight or fight response, right? And the release of cortisol, the release of adrenaline, the limitation of melatonin, the shutdown of the digestive system, that's all the hardwired process of the stress response. Understanding the presentation of stress in children, right? So again, it could be physical aggression, it could be emotional outbursts, it could be fear, being scared, feeling uncomfortable, just having a hard time with transitions, those kinds of things. And transitions is number 4, actually understanding what may make stress worse in children, right? Transitions being one of the things definitely that makes it worse. And then the research is showing that preschoolers who are with other preschoolers exclusively do tend to have a little bit more stress because of the fact that they're all at the same developmental level as each other. And then those children who maybe haven't had an opportunity to develop that secondary attachment to their childcare provider seem to also experience a little bit more stress than children who either are with their primary provider or children who have had the opportunity to have that secondary attachment. And then learning some strategies to effectively recognize and help manage stress for the children under your care. So we talked about more practical sort of environmental things that you can look at in terms of making things better for the kids, routine, structure, consistency. But then we also talked about, some other, tools and strategies that you can bring into your day with the kids to actually help them effectively manage their own stress levels. Not necessarily even understanding what might be causing them stress, but more about when they are responding to stress, what can help to bring that stress level down so that it's a little bit more manageable. So I hope that we were able to reach all of our objectives today. And I think we're almost making perfect time. So I'll open it up for questions.
Great. So we had one comment when you were talking about the guided meditations, and someone had said, so she said during the big school breaks, so she works in after school care. She said, I have my school-age children. We go to a big park and have lunch, and then all the children lay down and find a spot on the grass, and we listen to a meditation story, laying quietly, resting and relaxing. It helps with the mood for the rest of the day for the children. So that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, and that's perfect because not only are you helping them to see the benefits of meditation, and you're normalizing meditation. It's not this thing that weird people do or whatever. It's a normal part of what you do, but you're doing it out in nature, right? And so you're you're really helping them to when we have memories, right? So as adults, sometimes a particular smell will conjure up memories and will actually help us to feel in a certain way. And so something like that could be setting them up for the rest of their life, where whenever they go to a field or whenever they touch grass or whenever they smell grass, that it will bring them back to that, and it will allow them to actually come to that safe space in their mind and in their heart. And sometimes we get so busy because we're humans, and we've got lots going on and lots to do. But it's always important to be able to have tools that you can pull on in those times when you're feeling really busy and stuff. So again, like I had said, these things that we want to teach them in their younger years, these things are going to stay with them. These tools are going to stay with them, hopefully for the rest of their lives, and help them to grow into healthy, happy, calm adults. That's what we want. All right, what other questions?
Absolutely. So someone had a question too and asked if a freeze response is included for stress for children.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. So fight or flight is the typical way that the stress response actually had first started, like way back when, in the time of the cave people. But in modern times, there's actually a third option, which is freeze, right? So you fight to sort of protect yourself, to stand up for yourself, or you remove yourself from the situation and you choose to take that flight, right? And you just remove yourself. Or there is the option of just freezing, which means that you don't do anything. So neither do you stand up for yourself or try to protect yourself or fight for yourself, and nor do you remove yourself from the situation. So essentially, you just are stuck and you stay there and there is no action. So freezing is not a healthy option because the stressor is continuing. The stressor will remain. The thing that's causing you stress is going to remain. And there's no effective way to actually deal with that stressor. So yes, freezing is definitely a third option.
Okay. So Rishma, this question, I believe it's from someone that has like a licensed family childcare, like in their home. So they said, what about if your own child in your own daycare has to follow the same rules as the other children? Will that cause them stress? And I hope that I'm asking this the right way.
Okay.
So yeah.
So
the rules are different at daycare versus when the other children aren't there.
yeah.
And now their expectation is to follow the rules at daycare.
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, of course, this is tough, right? It's tough to be in that situation as the parent and childcare provider, but it's also tough and confusing perhaps for the child themselves, right? Because there's one set of rules when the other kids aren't here, and then there's another set of rules when the other kids are here. So depending on, the ages of the children, if it's at all possible, the most ideal situation would be that both scenarios have the same rules, right? So the rules during the daycare are the same as the rules after daycare, but I realize that, practically speaking, that sometimes doesn't work. And also that we need to provide our children with a safe space where they can just sort of let it all hang out and do whatever they need to do. And we need to cut our children some slack. So I think that depending on the ages of the child, it's really important to explain that difference and explain sort of why there's that difference, right? And that it's really important while they're with the other children to follow those rules at that time, because if they are not following the rules, then the other children won't follow the rules either, right? So it's definitely important to sort of work with your child and really help them to understand why it is the way that it is, because I think that it's, as parents, sometimes we just tell them like, this is what it is. But we just really need to, I think, explain and help them to understand why things are the way that they are. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. And Rishma too, I remember my coworker, she used to have a daycare in her home, and that was a big struggle. And I remember something for her was she let her daughter, like, so her daughter had her own space, her own room, and like none of the daycare children went in there. So her special stuff was in there, right? Like that she was able to control. So I hope that helps the participant as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's another question here, and it says, what are some good ways of helping a very sad child that is going through mental and physical stressors in the home environment?
Oh, it's always sad. Like, it hurts my heart when I hear that. And I think, you know, the important thing is to sort of to be with that child. Like, I don't know how to explain it. To be present with that child, to let that child know that you're there and that they don't have to do anything special or say anything special. There's nothing expected of them, but that you're there for them. And I think that it's, you know, it's always helpful to talk about feelings, right? So it's always helpful to talk about feelings with all the kids, right? And to talk about all the different emotions, like what is sadness, and go through that and show pictures and give examples. And then, you know, the children themselves also can come up with, well, when you're feeling sad, what are some of the things that you can do that might help you feel a little bit better, that might help you feel a little bit happier? And that they can actually help to sort of problem solve, because you know, we may not be able to change that child's situation, unfortunately, but what we can do is be there to support that child and also give that child tools for how they can maybe change their mood or shift their mood while they're at least in our care, so that they have the ability to be able to experience a little bit of joy and a little bit of happiness and silliness, even though there's sadness that's kind of overwhelming them. I hope that helps answer the question.
Great. Yeah. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to come off mute or to pop it in the chat as well.
And while we're waiting for you to just think of your questions, or to put things in the chat box, you know, I do again really want to reiterate that, you know, I have so much respect and gratitude for the work that you all do, and for the care of the children of this next generation of leaders, and you know, politicians and teachers and healthcare workers, and you are all a part of that. And I think that it's just so important that we're here talking today. It means so much to me. And I really appreciate having had the opportunity to talk with you this evening. And I hope that I've been able to share a little bit of knowledge with you that's going to help make your service a little bit better.
Someone put in, it's not a question, but they said they were talking about essential oils also being a calming thing. And then someone said that they like to bake snickerdoodles for cinnamon smells of calming.
Absolutely. Yep. Aromatherapy is so huge, right? And aromatherapy, again, same thing. It can take you away to a certain place, right? And so wouldn't it be wonderful if we can actually attach these wonderful memories for the children that we look after, and bringing out, you know, the different, like the peppermint oils and the eucalyptus oils, and, you know, all of that really good stuff, and lavender and chamomile. All of that stuff is so important, and it will just help to give the children different experiences, a variety of experiences, but all in all, these experiences are good for them, they're healthy, and they're actually giving them really good, solid tools.
Yeah, that's great. There's lots of thank yous and comments that it's very informative. There was one more question in here, Rishma, that someone was talking about night terrors. So they have a child that's at their center, and the parents are separated, and they're just wanting to know what the best way is to support her and her family.
Yeah, so night terrors are, you know, a very specific challenge that I would think would be best served by, say, a counselor, or, you know, a psychologist, if there's any way for the child to be able to access those mental health services. I would think that that would be the most beneficial in terms of how, as a childcare provider, they can be supported, is again to really help them alleviate their anxiety. So to help them find things and give them tools that they can use to help alleviate their anxiety, especially sort of before they go to bed. So there may be some things that they could do before they go to bed that might help reduce some of their anxiety. And this is where you would have to partner with the parents, right? Both parents, to see if there's a way that the bedtime routine can be supported in a way to actually help alleviate the anxiety. But I think that if it's going to be ongoing and they are continuing to suffer with the night terrors, some counseling or some psychological services would probably be the best thing.
Sorry, I'm not fast with the chat. Sorry.
Okay. I can see the numbers going up.
Yeah. So I'm just being mindful of the time. So I'll put one more question in. One more comment someone said too was to put lavender into the Play-Doh, like essential oil into the Play-Doh, which is a great idea too.
Yeah.
And so here's just the last question. And if anyone did not have their question answered, I do notice that Rishma's email is down here as well, and I'll include that with the recording as well. So it says, what is the best way to help a child who gets upset easily by things that other children may say to them that they don't like, to the point, so they get worked up and they can't focus on anything else?
Right. And so again, so this is where it sounds like they're kind of, they get out of control, right? So they get something has triggered them, has made them upset, has made them angry, and now they're kind of out of control, and it's hard to sort of bring them back down and calm them down, right? And so that's where the grounding activities might be really helpful. The deep breathing might also be really helpful, because I'm sure you've already explored sort of talking about it or talking through it. And it sounds like that probably hasn't really helped resolve the situation much. Like, what is it that upset you, or why do you think it upset you? And depending on the age of the child, that may not help anyways. So that's where things like just, not worrying about what is actually upsetting them, but just getting them to calm down by doing the deep breathing. So definitely doing the deep breathing, slow, deep breathing, sort of take them away from the rest of the children and just try to take them to a quiet sort of place where you can help just calm them down, help them with the deep breathing, do some grounding exercises so they can actually come back to this present moment, come back to this body. And then once they're actually calm again, then you can actually try to talk about it with them to try to figure out what it was that upset them. But when they're in that really upset phase, the best thing to do is just help them to calm down first, because they're going to be thinking irrationally anyway. So it wouldn't be beneficial to try to talk through it with them at that time. I hope that helped.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much. Like, it was so informative and so wonderful. And as we said, we were able to record this, so I will be able to send this out to everyone, the link. And we'll also be sending out a feedback survey, which would be greatly appreciated to be filled out as well. And the certificates as well.